Brian McArthur from Design My Medicare. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. If you would walk us through who you are, how you got started, curious about the clients, the situations that you serve, just give us that overview.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Josh. So I run a company called Design My Medicare. It was built specifically around the financial advisor community to help financial advisors demonstrate some leadership on the most overlooked part of the financial plan or planning process, Medicare, for reasons you probably already understand, or if not, you're about to, right? It's messy, it's complicated, it changes all the time, but it's part of every financial planning software. I just found a lot of financial advisors skipped over it, like I said, for reasons I empathize with. But planning's about steps, is that. And once the Medicare planning step comes up, I think it's important that financial advisors are the voice of reason amid a chaotic marketing effort to capture clients' attention. And it's just been a great way to work with the financial advisor community to help them refine and improve their financial planning process and just get a great Medicare result under their own watchful eye.
Speak to that. Speak to the volume of information that's getting blasted at let's just say the 64-year-old. What is that? There's a lot of noise. Walk me through your process of what it takes to listen and engage with a decision maker.
Yeah, great question. What I always try to impress upon financial advisors and the clients that they ultimately engage, validate this when the advisor reaches out to them, is starting at age 64, so 1 year before you're 65, the whole entire Medicare insurance industry knows who the 64-year-olds are. It's not very expensive information to get: name, address, date of birth. And clients get more mail than you can possibly imagine starting at age 64. Whatever you think a lot of mail is in your head right now, triple it. It's insane. And such a large portion of it, Josh, is fear-based marketing: deadlines, penalties, consequences. I know for a fact that's not the way you run but that's the type of marketing that clients are receiving. Doesn't matter if they are someone who builds bridges or they're the guy that lives under the bridge. That's the client experience. And like I said, it's not the way you run your business. And it really creates this nice opportunity for the financial advisor to reach out to the client and let them know that they understand what type of marketing that they are receiving, and really engage them at the height of their confusion and say, hey, you can throw that stuff out. We have a resource who's accountable to us. And that's really how the process starts.
What is Medicare, and what options does every retiree person, what are they considering? What are they signing up for? And ultimately kind of speak to where can that process go wrong, either because of anxiety which would cause someone to maybe pause the process or delay, or just saying if they had better resource, better education, or better questions, they would have had a better outcome X number of years from now. Walk us through that.
Yeah, another great question. The good news is with Medicare, there is plenty of room for optimism for when you go on to Medicare. That being said, there's a couple different paths to take, and there's no utopia. There's trade-offs. It's trade-offs among several different terrific options. But again, there's a right way to optimize it for what's important to a client. So number one, I would impress about that Medicare is good news and often great news. It's very often the best health insurance I've ever had. It's way cheaper in real dollars. I don't want your audience to get too excited about that cheaper part yet, because it depends. If somebody does not have employer-sponsored health insurance and they're paying through the nose for health insurance at age 64, they're going to do cartwheels when they go onto Medicare, because it'll be better, but it'll also be cheaper. If they are working for an employer, most employees don't pay the full cost of their health insurance. They pay a couple $100s a month out of their paycheck, and the employer typically pays quite a bit more behind closed doors. So for that client, going onto Medicare might be a little bit cheaper, about the same as what they're paying. Maybe it's a little bit more. But regardless of where they are in those three pricing outcomes, I don't like engaging in fear tactics. It's just not my style. I know it's not yours. Number one, I don't think there's some boogeyman outcome of like how somebody could goof this up irreparably, but there's certainly a right and wrong way to do it, right? Everybody's eligible at age 65. That doesn't mean everybody's going on to Medicare at 65. You and I know from the clients that we serve, 65 is not old anymore. And a lot of your clients in particular, Josh, they're working professionals. They've got autonomy in their career. They're typically, it's not uncommon. A lot of your clients are going to work until it stops being fun or stops being meaningful. And very often that's not age 65. It might be 66, 67, 68, something like that. So what I find is we typically, by working with the financial advisor community, are typically meeting people at age 64, because whether they know they're going on to Medicare at 65 or they're going to keep on working until it stops being fun. Again, because that volume of mail is so abundant at 64 and there's this emotion grabbing marketing, every client seems to appreciate you reaching out, engaging them at the height of their confusion. Nobody's stabbing a Josh Manifold voodoo doll at 64 saying this son of a gun's not talking to me about Medicare. They don't expect your help, but as you have experienced, they really appreciate it. So typically, and this working with us, is that you typically reach out to your 64-year-old, say, hey, how much mail are you getting? They laugh. You look cool. You were already cool, but you look cool again. And then you basically just make a low friction introduction to us. And then we reply to that email. Client has full autonomy on when and if to engage us, but you've seen it. Most people engage us at age 64 because they want that gentle introduction to Medicare, just know what it is and what they have to do by when. And at the end of that initial meeting, sometimes we have an idea of which insurance option we'll go with once it's time to enroll, which could be months or years later. But ultimately, back to the anxiety thing, we're in a nice opportunity to help clients turn a complicated topic into something simpler at age 64, even if they're not going on Medicare at 65. They appreciate that. Medicare has deadlines, and then we're in a position to just help them meet the deadlines. When they're ready to fully go on to Medicare, we guide them on how to apply for Parts A and B through the Social Security Administration. We uncover their income dynamics, which can measurably impact how much they do or don't pay for Medicare. And then also put their mind at ease if they're going to continue working. Very often the preference is to stay in the employer-sponsored plan, and that's almost always okay to do, where they will not be exposed to late enrollment penalties, but there's different dynamics and nuances there that we need to cancel people on.
Walk me through that 64-year-old has a list of pre-existing conditions. They have a list of current prescriptions. Walk us through the education, the options that they have as far as how do they engage with you and your team and your process to look at their current medical kind of history and complexity to then be guided to an attractive outcome. Like how does that work out?
Typically, like I said, you usually call them up, ask them how much mail they're getting. They laugh, you both laugh about it, and you offer an introduction to us over email. We reply to that email one time and one time only, just acknowledging the introduction and telling the client, if you click here, you have autonomy on when and if to engage us, and most of them do. And then in anticipation of that meeting coming up, our team sends a HIPAA compliant kind of information intake link that collects a bit more information and just helps us prepare and make better use of the time that we're going to have with the client. Most people complete that prior to the meeting. During the meeting, we've got a list of their meds, a list of their doctors. Usually don't dig too deep into health history in that form because it's something that usually comes up while we're speaking on phone or Zoom. And yeah, ultimately, it's helpful to know what medications people are on or not on. The different plans price different medications different ways, as you can imagine. On the insurance side, we typically cover that Parts A and B come from the government, and I'm going to say this hastily, C and D come from insurance companies. And there's two different paths to what we call C and D, Medicare Supplement or Medicare Advantage. So like I said, the good news is there is no bad news, but there are trade-offs between the two, and we help people weigh that. On Medicare Supplement, we really don't need to know who their doctors are because they can see every doctor in the country without a referral, and there's no networks. If we're not looking to Medicare Supplement and they're considering Medicare Advantage, we need to know who the doctors are, because most people want to keep their doctors. And even though a lot of your clients are predisposed to PPOs where they can go anywhere, you and I know that you want to try to find plans where the doctor is in-network, because in-network copays are lower than out-of-network copays.
What's changing for 2025? What does, that decision maker need to be aware of? What do they need to consider? What are you thinking about in relative to Medicare in 2025?
So every year or this time of year, Josh, this is marketing season for the Medicare industry as well. And again, you get a lot of that fear-based marketing at 64, but then you pretty much get it every year or every fall for the rest of your life. And a lot of that is still fear-based marketing, overblows the big changes this year, right? Things do change. This is a time of year where we are updating people's plans if there's a reason to do so. And while the marketing every year says big changes coming, that's often not the case, except for this year. The Inflation Reduction Act is being fully phased in, and part of that legislation is directly targeted at reducing out-of-pocket drug costs for people on Medicare. And just like any legislation, let me start with this, Josh. This is a year where basically everybody who's on Medicare will be impacted in some way. I don't want to overblow it, but ultimately, and it doesn't matter who passes gigantic legislation, if it's being inserted, Josh, into a private market, or health insurance is probably a semi-private market, there's going to be some clunky outcomes. So I would start with this. There's definitely going to be portions of people on Medicare who will benefit from the legislation, and there's going to be other groups of people, probably larger groups of people, who will just pay more. That's just the way legislation works. There'll be winners and losers, right? So the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be particularly disruptive. It will benefit people who are on really expensive medications. I'm going to say the more expensive your meds are, the more you'll benefit from the legislation. That's a small portion of the 63 or 64 million people who are on Medicare. A much larger portion of people will have the cost of that legislation passed on to them in higher monthly premiums for their Part D drug plans, and some lower benefits on their Medicare Advantage plans that wrap in the drug coverage. But now the cost of providing that drug coverage in this bigger package is more expensive to the insurance company. So there's new trade-offs or higher copays or drug deductibles or maybe crummier dental benefits. We're just squeezing the balloon in one area, and it's inevitably it'll pop out somewhere else.
Gotcha. For many retirees as entrepreneurs, there can be an unpredictable nature to their income. So can you speak to this idea of, as income goes up, goes down, goes sideways, what's the implication to the cost and the cover, or not the cover, sorry. What's the implication to the cost of their Medicare premiums?
Right. And dealing with clients who are in a position to have a full service financial advisor like yourself, we can, probably comfortably make several assumptions that a lot of your clients are good savers, because you need to be a good saver to be a client of Josh Manifold, right? And one of the ways you get there, or the primary way you get there, is higher income, right? As you're looking to migrate onto Medicare, the government's always looking at your income from 2 calendar years ago. And what we find with a lot of clients of yours and other financial advisors who we work with is it's not uncommon that somebody's biggest income year, or a couple's biggest income year, is towards the end of their career, right? That could just be higher income, higher liquidity events, like maybe they have to exercise stock options on the way into retirement, or start taking deferred compensation, or sell a business, or sell equity in some sort of asset, and their income spikes. Let's take a look at this real quick. I think this will help people understand. Again, let's just say you had a married couple, and I'm typically asking them, hey, if you're going on Medicare, January 1, 2025, the government's going to look at your income from 2023, your modified adjusted gross income. Remember, no human being on earth has this memorized. And one of the questions I would ask a couple about to go on Medicare is, hey, if you thought back to 2023, do you think you earned less than $206,000 in modified adjusted gross income? If they answered yes, I would prepare them that they would pay the minimum amount for Medicare Part B once they go on Medicare of $175 a month. very often, a lot of your clients say, no, we made more than $206,000. My next question is, okay, do you think that you made over $386,000 in modified adjusted gross income in 2023? Some portion of your clients say, yes, we did. And what you can see is that if that was the case, they're not going to pay $175 for Part B. They're going to pay about $635 a month for Part B. Big old difference between what the average American pays and what the government's going to try to charge them. And that's $635 a month per spouse. My next question is, okay, was that an anomaly or do you earn that every year? Answers vary, but very often your clients will say, no, that was an anomaly. We had a taxable liquidity event. I had to exercise stock options. I started taking deferred compensation, sold equity in my business. We sold a rental property, something like that. And I like to find out, okay, do you have any other liquidity events coming up, or are they done? So let's just say they said they were done. Okay, so you had a big income spike in 2023. We're not expecting any more big income spikes. As we look to 2025 and beyond, do you think that you'll be living on less than $206,000 in steady Eddie retirement income? Even people with really strong balance sheets often say yes. Okay, that's a pretty good amount of money in just monthly mailbox money. So in that example, 2 years ago, they earned over $386,000 and were preparing for this big, ugly Part B and D IRMA premiums. But as soon as they start on Medicare in 2025, they're going to be earning less than $206,000. Two things to think about, just is that when this is 2025 looking at 2023. In 2026, the government will automatically look at your 2024 tax return. 2027, they'll automatically look at 2025. So as your income settles 2 years later, your Part B premium would settle. But there are opportunities to get out of this faster. Back to this example that we're using, couples going on Medicare January 1, 2025, their income in 2023 was going to create this big, ugly number, but they think they're going to earn under $206,000 the moment they're on Medicare in 2025. There is a form called SSA 44 that once we uncover which of your clients are exposed to this type of higher premium, we encourage them to fill out that form. And what that form is doing, Josh, is basically allowing the client to say to the government, hey, please stop looking at our income from 2 years ago. We don't earn this much anymore, okay? We had a life-changing event, which is almost always work stoppage for one of the spouses. And then they would be asked to make a good faith estimate for what they thought their modified adjusted gross income will be in 2025. And let's just say they said it was going to be under $206,000. The government's actually pretty reasonable about allowing you to appeal your way out of this big, ugly premium and just say, okay, hey, we're the government, we're clunky. If you don't tell us anything, we're going to charge you this amount, right? $635 a month. But you had a life-changing event, you documented it, you think you'll come in under 206, then you've got a client who will actually start at that minimum Part B premium of $175 a month. They just have to do a little bit of paperwork to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Brian, this is great. I think one of the things that we see on a regular basis is that there can be a failure in communication around tax planning, financial planning, particularly around this thing called Roth conversions, where every year you're purposefully paying a tax bill earlier because there's something unique about the tax brackets that are available to you, maybe as a married couple. And so there's nothing worse than a tax surprise. And there's nothing worse than a Medicare premium surprise. That letter, that content, for some reason gets under everybody's skin. So that ability to say, hey, I have to build my team. Hey, I need to increase communication. I need to be surrounded by competent, trustworthy, highly communicative professionals. That's what we see in your team as far as the role, the lane that you play, along with all of our CPA friends, and then our role in this financial planning Roth conversion piece. For that early retiree, pre-73 couple, there's so many opportunities to be thorough, but unfortunately, there's the same opportunity to kind of drop the ball if someone's asleep at the wheel. So appreciate what you're doing. This is great content.
Yeah, my pleasure. Back to an earlier comment you made, and I think it's very gratifying to help people turn complicated topics into something simpler. You do that all the time, and then you and I work often in concert to do that specifically in the Medicare side. Anytime we can keep people from wondering, I think that's gratifying. And then number two, like I said, Medicare is usually good news to great news. Not everybody expects that. It's very easy to confuse Medicare and Medicaid, and Medicare is going to be great news even if you have a very high net worth. Medicaid is for lower income people, which has its benefits for that community as well. But number one, just in an effort to reduce anxiety, I would tell them like Medicare is pretty darn good news. So it's okay to be optimistic. And I wouldn't lose any sleep over that. I think it's also important to establish an online account at ssa.gov, whether you're going on to Medicare fully at age 65 or partially, because maybe you're going to stay on your employer plan. We're going to need you to log into your ssa.gov account to apply for Part A or A and B. And so I'd say good news, sign up for ssa.gov in anticipation of speaking to anybody about Medicare. And just know, I think like I said, if you don't have employer-sponsored coverage at age 65, you're going on to Medicare, but you'll be thrilled to be able to do that. And then I would also just let people know that if you're covered by an employer plan, just looking for your gentle introduction to Medicare at age 64, which most people appreciate, you're in the driver's seat. Most people, we advise that they stay on the company plan until they retire, but there are outlier situations where that's not what's ideal.
What do you notice about employer plans when you compare them to Medicare? Just curious, what you look at hundreds and thousands of these every year. What do you notice?
It really doesn't matter. Like I said, there's that good news or great news dynamic. There's a lot of meat on the bone for positivity and gratitude and things like that. But look, not the other part that people have to consider is how much does my employer take out of my paycheck? If your employer coverage is really crummy and they deduct a lot of money from your paycheck, you will probably be thrilled to go on Medicare at 65, leaving the employer plan. That's a possibility. I'm going to say it's probably not a probability. Most people have some combination of if they pay a good amount out of their paycheck, the coverage is usually pretty good. Again, not as good as Medicare, but everybody, if people aren't complaining about the plan they have and they say it's pretty decent coverage and this is what my employer pulls out of my paycheck, and we always like to point out like, hey, you can just stay on your employer plan. You don't have to worry about penalties in most cases. And we could actually put you on Medicare any old time after age 65. So clients in that situation really are in the driver's seat. If the employer plan feels like a good option, or at least good enough to not disrupt it, it's okay to stay on that employer plan. And if life changes in any way, we can actually throw you on Medicare anytime after. So there's plenty of options there. There's not this like looming deadline. Everybody's supposed to enroll in Part A at age 65, even if you stay on your employer plan. And most of the time we advise that people do that. There are some isolated situations where it does not make sense to do that. But if you're turning 65, you think you're going to stay on the employer plan, you're probably right. We're happy to serve as a fresh set of eyeballs to validate that is in fact the right idea, help you enroll in Part A. And a good example of somebody in that situation, Josh, let's just say they have they've got decent coverage, employer doesn't take too much out of their paycheck, or even if the employer does, maybe the client is 65, but their spouse is 62. That client's not going on to Medicare no matter how good Medicare is, because then their younger spouse gets dropped from the employer plan, and that's going to be a train wreck because it's very expensive to insure a 62-year-old in the individual family market. So that's an example where doesn't matter how good Medicare is, you're going to stay where you are. But one of the things I point out to people who are going to stay on their employer plan, let's just say there's so much vernacular on health insurance and how this stuff works and deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums and co-pays and co-insurance, right? They keep it just complicated enough that I always know I'll have a job tomorrow, which is an awful thing to say out loud. You're grateful for, but take somebody who's got a decent plan. They got a $3,000 or $4,000 deductible that they always worry about, like the boogeyman, right? They got a $4,000 deductible, but they've never hit it because they probably have just historically done primary care, specialists, labs, some tests, and they really wouldn't be exposed to that $4,000 deductible unless they had surgery. So let's just say we just say, stay on the employer plan and you got a $4,000 deductible, but let's just say down the road, you find out you need to have knee surgery and you do a little bit of poking around and you find out, oh my goodness, I'm going to write a $4,000 check for this surgery. I always joke around with clients and I say, don't call me the day before the surgery, but if you called us 2 or 3 months ahead of time, we could migrate you to Medicare right before the surgery and you go from a $4,000 deductible to a $0 deductible, right? So clients who are going to stay on the employer plan, they actually have a ton of autonomy. Once you retire, you're going to go on Medicare, but in between 65 and your retirement date, really only go Medicare if you're coming out ahead. But we help people navigate that all the time.
Yeah, that's great. I love the strategy, the possibility there. And there's so many things in life. It comes down to communication, right? Can you find the right environment to ask the right question? And can you trust the content, the advice, the recommendation you're getting? That's wonderful. Brian, thanks. We get constant feedback from clients that they like interacting with you and your team and your process, that you're highly responsive. And that's part of the reason that it's been a great fit as far as Compass Ion and your team at Design My Medicare. So again, just thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you're building. Our clients greatly benefit from who you are.
Oh, it's very important to us and anybody who you introduce us to that we can provide a meaningful and timely result. That's the first priority, to make sure they're happy. The very close second is to make sure that everything we do is reflecting well on your team and you. And if it feels like it is, typically everybody's winning. So I appreciate those comments, but we do take it seriously. And my only claim to fame, if this even is one, and I don't think there's a trophy, I checked, but I often tell clients that they'll never meet anybody who's met more financial advisors in their life than me. It's just for better, for worse. So it's always been my natural audience. And personally and professionally, Josh, you're about as good as they come. And I only say that if I mean it. So your clients are lucky to have you watching over and helping navigate their financial planning needs.
Brian, at the same time that retirees or individuals are considering this Medicare thing, they're wrestling with the complexities of long-term care and long-term care insurance. Walk us through what in that season, how people make decisions. Walk us through the start of Medicare and how long-term care and long-term care insurance and Medicare all get woven together. What do you know?
Yeah, so that's probably the topic that people will bring up to us most often, initiated by the client as we are navigating Medicare. And that's just proven to me, Josh, that those two topics, Medicare and long-term care, are sitting on a shelf right next to each other. So here's some things I always try to impress upon everybody, is that Medicare will cover, there's always a hope that Medicare is going to cover long-term care planning, or at least something more than nothing. And I squash that as quickly as I can, because it really is two different animals. So one, if there is any overlap between a Medicare package and long-term care, it is limited to this. Any Medicare option that you choose, a Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage plan, will typically cover you for 100 days of skilled nursing, which is great, right? Skilled nursing is really expensive. It's like a hospital with a lot less doctors rehabilitating people. So that's great that Medicare covers it. Two things I like to impress upon clients is, number one, if you ever have a long-term care event, and the statistics are high that a lot of people will, it's going to be longer than 100 days. You've seen this, Josh. If somebody has a physical impairment, those are often 2.5 to 3 year events. Cognitive impairments, I think the average is 8 years, right? So it's not for sissies. It's definitely worth planning for. And all Medicare does is skilled nursing. Additionally, what I'm sure you've observed within your practice and what I've seen with the long-term care industry reporting data, 80% of long-term care claims, where people are starting to collect money from their long-term care insurance company, are starting off for home care. It doesn't matter how nice the place is in your neighborhood. You don't want to go there until you have to. Everybody wants to be at home. So I think what's helpful is we always encourage people to make sure, if they haven't already, just have that deep dive conversation with you. Women are often more open to that conversation than guys, but there's other things guys have to do to stay healthy that we joke about and say, you just got to do it. So I think it's important to keep in mind that this isn't like life insurance that's looking at the risk as something killing you quickly. It's something that is creating a non-revenue generating employee in your house to take care of you. And surprise, like your family will be involved in your care. You probably want your loved ones in a position to oversee and manage your care rather than be the ones who are your caregiver. There's a big old difference between those two types of roles. And your loved ones will probably wear both hats. But I think it's important for people to consider the impact that has on the caregiver. People don't want to think about it, so therefore they don't always think about the dynamics of it. You see it, Josh. Most of that responsibility falls on the females in the family. It's just the way it is. It's very taxing on having a smaller, lighter female family member picking you up and moving you around. It just sets them up for injury, lost income. There's just so many dynamics, and I think what's helpful about having that conversation, and a lot of your clients are good savers. I would never villainize self-insuring that risk. There's often a better way to do it, and then if you're not wealthy enough to self-insure the risk, maybe all the more reason that some sort of insurance might make sense. But that's your department to discuss with people. But that long-term care planning is a topic that people will most often bring up to us unsolicitedly while we're navigating the Medicare discussion. And your clients probably already know you are more than well prepared to be able to walk them through that part of the planning process.
Brian, thanks for today. If client or anybody listening to this wanted to reach out to you, where do they find you? What's the easiest way to get in touch?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the website is designmymedicare.com, and if clients go there, they can click and schedule a meeting. If they do that, we always ask who introduced us, which is almost always their financial advisor. So that's certainly one way. The other thing, I would say, not that we have a preference, but I think it's helpful to everybody if they actually reach out to you and just ask for that introduction. So at least it starts an email thread between you, the client, and us, and still, we'll reply instantly with that scheduling link. So my first preference would be that they reach out to you to facilitate that introduction, but there's no harm in going to designmymedicare.com if they'd like to do it that way.
Wonderful. Thanks.